You're listening to Alcoholics Alive, where recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous share their experience on how they live AA as a way of life. None of our participants get paid or speak for AA. Here are your hosts, Shank and Wayne. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 13, Wrap Up with Shank and Wayne. It's been a good season, Shank. We actually have had some new terms come in from some of our guests. We've had some awesome guests this season, by the way. So if you're out there listening, thank you. I liked the Super Scrap that Tammy introduced to us.
It's pretty great.
That was pretty good. Spiritual Cotton Candy came from Otis. We need to add that to our shrapnel list for future. Matter of fact, we may do it at the end of this segment.
We very well may.
If there's time. Matt said that AA was therapy for $1.
No.
I like that Courtney was 12-step by her date.
Oh, that's right. Off of one of those dating sites or something, wasn't it?
That's right.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess he picked up on her problem like almost immediately, huh?
Yeah. He was
That's
like,
pretty
wow.
cool. Yeah. And then Bill introduced us to a term called Today's AA, which we probably ought to do a whole segment on. Matter of fact, I guess you could say this might be that.
It might be.
I guess today's AA is a little different than what's in our literature, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, if you're out there listening, thank you for sticking with us through the traditions. A little bit about the history of the traditions for anyone that's interested. Bill Wilson was. There's lots written on this, and there's actually a lot of contradictions in some of our own history. If you read AA Comes of Age, some old grapevine articles, Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, Pass It On, various pamphlets. It's all similar, but I don't know that any of it's 100% clear and accurate. But groups in AA were having a lot of problems early in the early 40s with trying to figure out requirements and charters versus no charters. Who could come, who couldn't come, who was going to pay, who wouldn't pay, what AA was going to get involved in and what it was not going to get involved in. And a lot of group problems were coming to Bill and even to the trustees of the Alcoholic Foundation. And I think that Bill didn't want to really get involved too much in the business of members and groups, but I felt like that there should be some kind of guidelines or parameters. So, hence the 12 traditions. And what were they called, Shank, when he first published them?
The 12 points of AA tradition?
Oh, that's right. 12 points to assure our future.
There you go.
Yeah. So he started writing them in 45. The first one was published in April 1946 in the Grapevine. And as we've already pointed out, back then they were the long form that you would find in the back of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, or I think now if you use the 12 by 12, which we don't, they're at the end of each chapter,
mm-hmm.
and in the back of the book, the long form are. And a lot of people know the story. He was trying to sell them, and he was going across the country talking about them, and people got tired of him talking about them. And AA member in Chicago, Earl T. Stories in the book Alcoholics Anonymous called "He Sold Himself Short." Convinced Bill that they were a little too complicated and long, and they wrote. He suggested that they condense them down, and hence he wrote the short form. And that is ultimately what got approved at the convention in 1950. So 12 points of AA tradition, 12 points to assure our future, the 12 traditions, whatever you want to call them. If they were closely followed, I would think that maybe AA would look a little different today than it does. Maybe not, but I often say, and it takes a while to understand this, but everything you like about Alcoholics Anonymous is because of the 12 traditions. Everything you don't like about Alcoholics Anonymous is because of the 12 traditions.
There you go.
Yep, so that's some
That's
shrapnel.
what I've been learning.
That's some shrapnel for you. But he wrote a few cool things that nobody invented Alcoholics Anonymous. It grew by trial and error, and it was produced a rich experience. Little by little, we've been adopting the lessons of that experience, first as policy and then as tradition. And that process still goes on, and we hope it never stops. Should we ever harden too much, the letter might crush that spirit. We could victimize ourselves by petty rules and prohibitions. We could imagine that we had said the last word. We might even be asking alcoholics to accept our rigid ideas or stay away. May we never stifle progress like that. Pretty powerful words.
It's pretty powerful.
Yep. So traditions were born out of experience. They didn't just make them up.
Well, and thank God, because I have been so fortunate, I think, to be surrounded by people in Alcoholics Anonymous since getting sober, who were writing to me while I was incarcerated, kind of keeping me within the steps and the traditions.
Yeah.
And they were explaining to me, like, when I liked something, when I didn't like something, when something happened, when I thought something was total BS, they would explain to me, oh, well, this sounds like a Tradition 3 issue. And I'd be like, that's not what I'm trying to talk about. I'm trying to tell you that I'm irritated with this prison AA meeting where someone has like boofed their medication and brought it to the AA meeting to give it to someone else. And it's ruining my experience trying to get sober, So thank God that people allowed me to be wrong. They
Yeah.
gently and sometimes firmly directed me to what I needed to read to learn what the traditions are and how they were applying to my life, even though I didn't really know anything about them.
Yeah.
So I feel very fortunate. I'm still learning all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. We're fortunate to live in an area where for the most part, traditions are alive, and a lot of groups and individuals try to follow. And we've certainly have had some good leaders and some good teachers.
I will tell you, the people surrounding me have always told me not to wield the traditions or concepts as a sword just to cut people down in conversations, which
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm starting to think that maybe I'm gonna go against that advice for a couple years, see what happens. Start telling people, well, in fact, because of Tradition 8, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I might start doing it.
Yeah. Well, we may have to. It's funny, you rarely see people arguing over steps, right? So if somebody has an experience on a particular step, it's their experience, and we kind of may not always agree with it, but we just kind of say, okay, that's your experience. Well, here's my experience. But when it comes to traditions,
Yeah.
people will start arguing, and they're like, no, that's not what it says. This is what it says, and they will start using them as like weapons against people.
Yeah, I may start, so y'all stay tuned.
Yeah, yeah, it's why I like the long form.
Yeah.
It's pretty specific, and there is no like, well, here's my interpretation of it. It says what it says.
I think it's more the application, not
Right.
the interpretation that gets
Yeah.
skewed. Maybe just from what I've seen.
That's a good point. So Shank, what is the topic today? Are we
So today, we're just kind of gonna roll through the traditions and either clean up anything that we didn't get to, or there are some questions on here, just maybe that our guests brought up, or maybe notes that I
okay?
made during the episode. I can't exactly remember if all of this stuff was um, brought up or not, or if it's just something that kind of struck me while we were going through it. So um, I think we'll just go through and try to
Let's
clean it up or add anything.
let's roll in. And then we're not scrapping or anything now. We're keeping the traditions.
We're keeping them all.
But we do have to clean up a little bit.
That's right. So, one kind of question on tradition one, um, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Was, does the start of so many new AA groups promote unity?
Well, I understand the idea of starting a new group, and I've started a few new groups myself. They were they were started out of really specific needs for the community. They weren't started so I could have my own format or so, and because we were resentful at somebody. I mean, you hear all that kind of cute talk, but
A resentment in a coffee
I,
pot.
yeah, it seemed, and I know it feels good to say, oh man, they're starting a new group. That means there's more opportunity for people to go, but it a lot of groups nowadays are started because somebody wants to talk about something specific, or they want a specific format, or they want to deviate a little bit maybe from, I don't know, literature or whatever it is, or they're specialized.
Hmm.
And it seems to me that it does not create unity. It it kind of segregates people to me, and because we talked about this on one of the other podcasts, because then what happens is, oh, that's Jimmy's meeting, or you going to Alice's meeting, or that's Frank's meeting, or oh, man, I don't go over there. They're too, too structured, or I don't go over there. They're too, and that's the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it just seems to me like it segregates people. And there was a time, I mean, AA's always had differences of opinion between members and, you know, the way people apply the steps and stuff. It's always been different. But it seems to me that AA was a little more unified when there were less groups. And I can remember when I got sober and they would have these intergroup like dinners or like a intergroup unity day, there would be hundreds of people there.
Hmm.
And there were not as many groups as there are now. There would be like where we live now, there were like 4 or 5 main groups, and all those people would come together for that. And now, I mean, you have a like an intergroup or have like a function around here, and you're lucky to get 40 or 50 people. And there's 100 groups. I don't know how that's unity.
It's very bizarre. Like, I've seen a lot of groups start since I've been sober. I haven't ever started a group, but my experience with, I guess, like groups promoting unity or not is I was a member of one group for several years. And I remember pretty early on, I was talking about going to like a non-AA conference, but it was from like a different group. And
Hmm.
it wasn't just put on by that group, but it was a different group of people. And I remember people in my home group being like, oh, you're going to that, or are you going to go to this other one that we all go to? And I just thought it was so odd. I was like, well, I just want to go somewhere else. Like, what's the big deal? And I guess it wasn't a huge deal, but I learned in that moment that I'm just going to do whatever I want with whomever I want. And it's typically the same people from the same several groups in our area that go and do everything anyway that I'm
Yeah.
involved in. But I did think that that was so weird. Or even when I changed my home group, it was like, oh, you're going to this other lineage. It's just odd. And so I've seen it from the camp of I don't know, I guess younger people in AA or whatever who get into these groups with old timers, which I really appreciate. But I was in one group and it was this guy group and he had been sober a
Yeah.
million years, longest in North Carolina. And okay. And then I went to a different group. It's like, oh, now you're part of this other guy's group. And it just is like, it's not like that at all. Like those two men, it's never,
No.
my experience has never been like, this is my group and this is how it functions. So I do
Yeah.
think that some of that is probably based on just the members of the group.
Yeah.
Like propping someone up because they respect them and they want to learn from them, but they don't know how to just say, can you help me? Instead,
Yeah.
it's, I'm a part of this lineage and this group, and it's the only one.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know. Hmm. Well, the other, I mean, we're not naive to know that that stuff doesn't exist. I mean, of course it does. Um, the other thing that, and we've beat this to death before, but the specialty groups and or the specialized groups and even the all of the different pamphlets that are written. Um, Again, I just don't know how that promotes unity. I mean, I know it feels good to have a pamphlet for, an old guy, but to me, again, it just separates people. It points out differences. It says, "Hey, you are different."
Hmm.
Again, we help alcoholics, all alcoholics. It doesn't matter what your other problems are. So I think, those specialized pamphlets, to me, in the groups, they exclude people. How
I
about,
just I just can't imagine asking someone their entire background for any reason. If I'm going to help someone, I'm going to help them. If I hear someone share in a meeting, that they are struggling and they want to die, I'm going to go up to that person at the end of the meeting and say, "Hey, do you want help? Do you have a
yeah,
sponsor? Do you even know what that means? Do you know you're at an AA meeting?
yeah,
Have you ever worked the steps? Have you ever tried to help anyone else?"
yeah,
Because it doesn't matter if everything they were sharing was complete nonsense, garbage, uh, I don't know, like therapy speak, out from the world speak. It just doesn't matter.
yeah,
And that's what
yeah.
I was taught in AA. So it's like if there is a woman that is needs help, then you help her.
You help her. Yeah, and I mean, we know that people, when they come in, they feel different, and some people may have different lifestyles or different skin colors or, um, disabilities or accessibility issues, and that's when it's up to each individual a member to be practicing these traditions and don't let that interfere with how you help that person and welcome them.
Hmm.
That's what's important, not, not shoving a pamphlet in front of their face and say, "Oh, hey, we do know you're different, and but you can this will work for you anyway. Here's a pamphlet that proves it."
Well, and I know everyone's experience is not my experience, but I did not want any of you all to know I was a criminal, that I was going to go to prison. Thank God no one knew that and handed me like the corrections information because I would have been
Right?
like, I am out of here.
Yeah.
Like that's just
Yeah.
my experience, but I didn't want anyone to know. I just wanted to be able to get sober and maybe forget that any of that ever happened.
Yeah.
Which also, thankfully, that is not what happened. But so tradition two, for our group purpose, there's but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. So, a question that I had on this one is how can there be a group conscience when we're not completely informed? Because I feel
Well,
like I'm a pretty active AA member and I've done a lot of different avenues of service. I've been involved in things. And I just feel like I just cannot keep up. I mean, I read through the, what's it called, the P whatever, and I read through the information about the conference and everything that's going on. That's a freaking 200-page book.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like I still just like cannot stay informed. How does anyone do that?
Well, you can't. And you technically, if you believe the concept of the second tradition, you really can't have a group conscience, an informed group conscience. I mean, you can at the group level, right? If you're debating an issue or something comes up, and I mean, a group can get informed before it makes like a group decision. Um, but when you start talking about stuff at area or even at the general service office, it's just difficult to keep members informed. And it, it it appears, at least in the last several years, that some decisions are made before there's sufficient discussion and sufficient information provided. Um, and I think there's some good verbiage in the A group pamphlet about a group conscience. Um, it talks about it, it kind of develops over time when there's a lot of discussion and a lot of information provided, and that even in some cases, if there's not a clear conscience, that a lot of times the group should not make a decision, right? It should be tabled or just kind of put to the side for a little bit. Um, and to be fully informed, I guess this is something we should probably talk about. You got to listen to the minority opinion, right? And so many, and people will not say this publicly, but many times now, I don't know what the word would be, but an AA member that wants to stick to literature and wants to stick to the book and that wants to stick to the 12 steps as they're written is now in some places is the minority, whereas it used to be the opposite. And so now if you have an opinion that's based on common sense and fact and our steps and traditions, and many times people think that you're closed-minded, you're you don't have any vision, or you're what's the word? You're mean, or they feel threatened just by you speaking the truth. So I've actually kind of seen that flip in Alcoholics Anonymous, and so now I mean, and nobody wants to listen to that minority opinion much anymore. It doesn't seem like. I don't know if you've seen that or have
Of
had that
course I have.
experience.
I've been the minority opinion a lot.
Yeah.
And even when I have been in, a group setting with a committee, um, and I'm not in the minority, even when the opinion that I hold or that I brought up is something that most everyone agrees with, it's still not appropriate for the minority
Yeah.
opinion just to be shut down.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
person should get to speak and say what they want to say, and people should consider it. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's definitely something that I have worked on and will continue to work on, like to actually consider what someone is saying, and not be so married to whatever my opinion is. It's hard to do that
Yeah.
because over the last several years, I've brought up several issues and I've had information to back them up, even just like, in a service situation of like, hey, we don't need to come up with rules and regulations here. We have bylaws. Like, let's print them out. Let's go by the bylaws. And that was like, you would have thought that I wrote the bylaws myself and was forcing everyone to
Yep.
adhere to them. And I got roasted for it until the
Yep.
next meeting when everyone pretended like they knew all about it. Like that never happened.
Yep.
So it gets
Yeah.
increasingly difficult sometimes when you are right about when I am right about something, and then it just feels like we're gonna prove you wrong somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
It's not even really
Nowadays,
about that.
yeah. And a lot of times now people like in some of those cases you're talking about, a lot of those people knew what you were saying was accurate. They didn't. They let your personality get in the way of them actually. I mean,
I
oh,
know.
yeah, it does. And so that's one of the things. Like people don't want to admit that that happens in AA, but it does.
Yeah.
It absolutely happens. And the reality is that we both have actually seen really cool things come out of a group conscience. We're not saying it doesn't exist. We both have been involved in situations where something like it was going this way and then it went that way and it ended up actually being the right decision. So we know that happens, and um, that a loving God is probably involved in a lot of those decisions, but probably not all of them when all the facts aren't there and people aren't keeping an open mind. And I used to, I used to kind of be in all of our structure and how decisions are made at the conference level. But more and more, I'm not saying that our process is flawed, but it's increasingly, I think, impossible to get a true group conscience in Alcoholics Anonymous with a single delegate representing an area. And it's almost like it, with the advent of communication and social media, or just the way that people can communicate quickly, and all the surveys they send out now about whether you want to go to the international convention because of COVID. Um, that was a little jab at you. I mean, it's stupid, but so why not really get a true group conscience about other stuff on
Well, and
on
that's my point, is like certain things are only used and it's one-sided.
Yep.
It's only used, when it's necessary to move a conference onto Zoom or back off of it. It's not used to actually distribute information quickly,
Yep.
which I think would be really beneficial.
It would be very beneficial.
And I think it's
But
interesting too, things that just get kind of railroad. I mean, in our area, there's like this very beautiful location that we've met at for assemblies and a state convention, and it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. I liked staying there. There's a lot to do. Personally, I'm not going to pay the entrance registration and not do all the AA activities there, but it's not accessible. So I just think it's
mhm.
interesting. It seems to me that like bringing up accessibility issues, um,
Yeah.
you would think that that would take precedence over, well, people just like it because they can have fun there. And
Right.
I just can't understand how an accessibility issue is a minority issue when we have aging members. Going back to, you know,
But yeah.
first tradition of the special interest groups or whatever, like there are reasons that we should pay attention to those things, and it's so
Well, there's
people
the
can
con
participate.
yeah, there's the contradictions in how people apply stuff just to suit a certain thing. I mean, well, I'll spare those comments there. Just so we can.
Tradition three,
Yep.
the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking.
That's what it says. Yep. I like the term, do you suffer from alcoholism, or all who suffer from alcoholism.
Hmm.
And this is one that's really, we talk a lot about in AA, and you'll hear people that they'll complicate it and spin it into something that's not. It's very simple. Do you suffer from alcoholism, or do you have a drinking problem? If the answer is yes, then you can be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it it doesn't matter what your other problems are, right? We've said it before, right? We don't help young people. We don't help females. We don't help uh, non-binary. We don't help African Americans or Native Americans or the Haitian Creoles. I think that's a pamphlet now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a pamphlet just for Haitian Creoles. We love them, but we don't need a pamphlet for them. We help alcoholics. I mean, that's the point. And if we would focus more attention on that instead of calling out people's, problems or individuality, we'd be much better off. We could even
Well, then
save
maybe
money
we
on.
wouldn't be operating from a deficit,
Correct. We
but
could
we'll get
save
there.
money. That's right.
We'll get there.
Save money on all those pamphlets.
Mm.
And it's funny that we talk about, and here's another contradiction, right? So we talk about how we want to be all inclusive, but yet we have events at places that create accessibility issues. But when you bring that up, nobody wants to talk about
Hmm.
it, right? We claim we love people and we want to help people, and then COVID hits and everybody shuts their meetings down, and now you have created an accessibility issue for a lot of people that don't have uh, internet or high speed internet or a computer or a smartphone or know how to use Zoom. And so now you've basically have established another membership requirement for many people. And when these points are brought to people, oh no, that doesn't apply anymore. It just makes no sense to me. I mean,
Yeah, I
so
know.
anyway, if you got a drinking problem, you're welcome to come here. I mean, we don't care what else problems you have. Um, but you can't be a member of AA if you don't have a drinking problem. You
And you
just can't.
shouldn't just replace your problem and say alcohol.
Yeah, yeah. Which happens a lot. I mean, we have AA members that just tell people, "We'll just come in here and change the words and
Mhm.
say you're alcoholic, even though you don't identify as being an alcoholic, or maybe you've never even drank." And I think Bill Wilson wrote that harms that person.
I get in the most trouble with this one in the prison, and there's probably going to be some more ladies going in with me here soon, which I'm excited about, but um I don't know. I think something about going into a facility, maybe hospitals and institutions, maybe something else. I don't know, treatment centers, treatment facilities. But my experience is in the prison, and AA members will take a meeting in there and just feel like, well, they don't have anything else, and they're saying how
Yep.
horrible it is here, and it can probably just be used the same, and they don't have an NA meet, and they do. They tell you they don't because they don't want to attend that meeting at that time, you know. But there are several meetings. There's Celebrate Recovery. There are all kinds of
Yeah.
meetings that go into the facility, and I direct those people to those other meetings.
Yeah.
You want to try something else? Great. AA is not the only way to get and stay sober. And if you're a drug addict, go to the NA meeting.
That's exactly right.
I
Yeah.
don't really know that lady. I've talked to her a few times. She can't understand how I never did drugs. I'm just like, I don't know, man. I'm an alkie.
Yeah. Yeah, many times our members just take the term love and tolerance too far. They just tell people because it makes them feel good, I guess. Yeah, just come in here and you're fine. And we'll tell, non-alcoholics or people who don't identify with being alcoholic to attend our meetings, and it's just doesn't make any sense to me.
It was very interesting. There was a non-alcoholic in our meeting this morning, and she was trying to jump ahead. And she said, well, I just want to know about the trigger of Suboxone. And I said, listen,
Yep.
AA has no opinion. It doesn't say anything in this book we're reading about triggers. And AA didn't have an opinion about Suboxone. I don't know anything about it. Also, this we're talking about the fourth step, so I don't really know. I can't explain. You're a non-alcoholic. I can't really explain this deal to you, but if you ever cross that line, you'll understand better.
Yeah, yeah. It's always crack. I mean, if you were a Baptist, would you go to a Catholic church?
No.
No. I mean, if you were into yoga, would you go to, the I don't know, Pilates and expect them to be doing yoga? No. I mean, this shouldn't be any different.
I do think a lot of people end up in AA and they probably have a drinking problem and they don't want to admit it. So But of
Yes.
course, there's some nuance in there. Like I talk to people, they say, "Oh, I was only a street drug addict and this and that." And then you talk to them and like they were drinking mouthwash. And I'm like,
Yep.
"Okay."
There is that for sure.
Yeah. So of
Yep.
course there's some nuance to it. And like I love that about AA. You never know what someone's gonna tell you that they did. That you're
Yep.
like, okay, interesting. Very, you were drinking mouthwash. That was very interesting. Okay, that was very interesting. Maybe you're doing that
Yep.
so that you could get drunk. Okay,
Yep.
that
Yep.
might qualify.
Yep. And it's partly our responsibility to have those conversations with people to help them figure that out. Yeah. We're not implying to just kick people out.
No.
No. I thought tradition four,
Tradition four.
I thought Tammy brought up a good observation about, she said that, groups that like don't follow traditions, meaning like, so if a group, allows non-alcoholics to be members, or if they're, doing bake sales or other things, does that impact surrounding groups, or does it impact the AA name? And I had never really thought about that like that, but it probably does. But
When I
this is
think
one of
it's especially because she's in a rural area
mm-hmm,
that, I mean, that can be true of any area.
yep,
But I do think of like where I'm from in East Tennessee. I mean, there's not even a meeting every day. There's probably not even one every other day.
yeah,
And so you have one meeting that's doing some crazy stuff. I'm sure it can impact AA, in the whole county.
yeah. That, yeah, this is one of the traditions that really kind of opens the door for groups to do whatever they want to do. Because no matter what you do, if somebody says, "Well, you really shouldn't be doing that," well, hey, we're autonomous.
Hmm.
I think the thing about autonomy though is that with autonomy, there's a lot of freedom, right? You can read this in the literature, but there's also a lot of responsibility,
Yeah.
right? And groups are free to do what they want to do, but they ought to be responsible to what our steps and what our traditions and what our concepts say.
Well, and when I was really thinking about her question, it wasn't so much maybe it was groups not following the traditions, but it's not my job or duty. Like I can speak up as a minority opinion if I feel like that's happening in my home group, and it has
Mm-hmm.
before. Um, and I can lovingly s- s- leave that group, and I don't have to
Right.
be angry or upset, uh, or blow up the business meeting and then leave. Like I didn't have to do that. I can just bring it back to like, okay, well, all these groups are autonomous. This group that I've been a part of for years, like they have the right to do what they want to do. And it seems like the group conscience, the traditions one and two that we've talked about, it seems like it's been made up, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can find a group that I think aligns better with how I live my life. Um, because no group's ever going to do everything the way I think that they should do it. And that's probably for the best.
Probably. Yeah. For all of us.
Hmm.
Yeah. What about tradition five?
Tradition five, one primary purpose,
Hmm.
carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. What
Well,
are we doing that is harmful to the alcoholic? So if we're supposed to be, you know, if our primary purpose is to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers, how are we not doing that? What are we doing that's harmful?
one would be if we're spending too much time talking to them about their skin color.
Right.
I mean,
Any of their outside issues.
I hate keep tying it back to stuff like that, but yeah, I mean, if we start asking them questions or focusing on their outside issues or their their so-called differences, that to me it diverts us from our primary purpose of helping the alcoholic,
Hmm.
right? And even the idea of having a conversation about that initially, I think it stands in the way of our common problem of our alcoholism. So that would be one thing.
Which I
Um,
think it's interesting. I go to a couple of meetings frequently, not every week, where I'm the minority and no one has ever commented on it.
right. How about that?
I mean, they'll comment on like, I
That's a
wear the same
very
pair
good
of
point.
boots all the time, or, oh, you've changed your hair color. It looks nice, or I hate it, or, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just a non-issue. I don't feel awkward going there.
Yeah.
It's a meeting I want to
Th-
be at. All those people
That's
are
right.
freaking great.
Yeah. They're not bringing it up, are they?
No, it's a meeting that I like going to. It's just
Yeah. Hmm. So if we get involved in other things with people, trying to help them find a job or get a place to stay or get too involved in their medical history or their prescriptions or things like that. I mean, that probably a diversion from the primary purpose.
listen, the people that I help, I don't know anything about medication, and at this, I've refused to learn it.
Yeah.
I'm not on any, I never have been.
Yep.
And, you know, it can just roll right off of me. People can tell me, and I'm like, hey, I don't have an opinion on that, neither does
Yep.
AA. Like
Yep.
we're not here to discuss it. If you need to talk to your doctor,
True.
if you're
Yep.
misusing your medication, yeah, or if you feel like something needs to happen with it. I
Hmm.
don't know the answer to that.
Yep. Yeah. I love this. It says sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps is the sole purpose of an AA group. So, if we just make a decision we're going to help alcoholics and we stick to the teaching and practice of 12 steps, it's hard to go wrong.
Hard to go wrong.
And we can do that with anybody that thinks they have a drinking problem,
Yep.
regardless of any other problem they have.
And I've definitely been the girl, who is screaming at their sponsee on the phone. I mean, it's happened with one specific person, and I've been that girl who I've been harmful in the way that I've tried to quote carry the message because there were all these other things going on in her life that she wanted to tell me about all the time I mean, if she could get sober, half the stuff would go away. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, I really in that moment lost what my primary purpose to help that alcoholic who was still suffering really was.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I've taken her to detox 3 or 4 times, but
Yeah.
um, it's interesting how as I continued to mature, and it's through conversations, not arguments, it's through conversations where once again, going back, I'm the minority or the majority opinion in something, and I'm able to listen and really consider something that someone else is saying and how it would help or hinder carrying the message, then I'm able to grow. And so, like, I'm able to talk to that woman today and say, you know what? I've really matured a lot. And I do think that you can get and stay sober despite all of this other stuff that's still going on.
Hmm.
When a few years ago, I was like, no, all this has to change. You can't get sober, still doing all this crazy stuff. Like, what the heck? Look, you drink every time. I don't have to make that determination today. Thank God.
No, you don't. All right.
Tradition 6.
Tradition 6. Hmm. Yeah, to
I can
me,
still
this
get
one,
really confused about this.
well, I think it ties right into to five, right? If our sole purpose is to help alcoholics, then we should avoid things like owning property. We should avoid having too much money or raising money, and we should avoid having, prestige or notoriety like at the public level and in the community because it in AA we say, well, alcoholics don't do good with money and property. Well, no human does good with money and property. It's not an alcoholic problem. We always talk like that.
Yeah.
But it's since man has been alive, right? Property and prestige and money. You could add sex in there, even though it's not in the tradition. Um, because I don't know that a group could have sex. Maybe it can, but um, it diverts people from what they're supposed to be doing. So if we're supposed to be helping alcoholics, then we should avoid, things that accumulate money or owning our own property and things like that. I mean, I think that's really what it's saying, and this is one that's born out of a lot of experience from early groups.
Well, okay, so where I get a little bit confused
Hmm.
is when you have like an AA club and then they have membership dues. Now, I know that that is separate from AA, but what I read, and I mean, this is old writing, is that the club is managed by someone, something outside of AA, but my only experience with seeing it is AA members who are on a board who run the club, who
Yeah,
pay dues,
yeah,
who have a
yeah.
special coffee mug.
Got to have that coffee mug on the wall. Yeah,
I don't think that that would be healthy for me personally.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I think technically, and by the letter of the tradition, if the club is has its own board and it's managed separately from the groups, um, even if the board is made up of some of the AA members, I don't. I mean, I think technically that's probably the right way to do it. Um, a lot of times that gets muddy. A lot of times the board members can't separate the group life from the club life, or the board membership from policing and monitoring what groups are doing in that facility.
So does
And
that mean
then
that
and then
someone on the board owns the property?
so so in some cases, if you've traced it all the way back, a lot of them are done that way.
Okay.
There's one well off AA member that
Yeah.
bought the property or bought the building and established an LLC, and then they have the board or they set it up somehow like that. So that happens in a lot of those places. And some of them it's not that way. Um, it's legitimately like an outside company that owns it, and they rent space to groups. So you see it done differently. Regardless, in a lot of situations, the impression from AA members and kind of the implication there is it looks like, man, I got to pay membership dues to come to meetings here.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's almost never the case, but that's kind of what it looks like.
And
And
I assume that they probably try and put that information out there, like, hey, these membership dues are not to be a member of AA, but I could just see, like, if I was a member of a group that met at a club like that, it would get tiring to say that all the time. And you'd forget that there are new
yeah,
people in the room that see that up on a
yep,
bulletin board and are like, wait a minute, what the heck?
yeah, yeah. It can be confusing. It's a longer
I'm, I'm
conversation, but
still,
even
I'm still
even
confused.
even a lot of the clubhouses in the state we live in were actually
Mhm.
built by the ABC board. So when they when
What?
yeah, when North Carolina came out of Prohibition, or when the country came out of Prohibition, and in North Carolina, right, if you don't know, if you're going to buy liquor or what they call spirits, you have to go to a specific ABC store. Alcoholic Beverage
Mhm.
Control was what it's called. And so when we came out of Prohibition, there were laws and things written in North Carolina that the Alcoholic Beverage Council had to give so much money back towards rehabilitation from alcoholism. And so a lot of the money was sent to counties and they built clubhouses. And then, so, yeah, the one, and a lot of them will say like AA club on the side, which again is kind of not in the spirit
Mm-hmm.
of the traditions. And they were kind of donated or given to, they established like corporations for them. But I mean, the local communities got some of them for free.
Wow.
Yeah.
That just blew my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. You ever been to like, there's some like in Dunn and Goldsboro and,
No, the only one I've been to
no,
that's probably anything like that is the one in Sanford. Is it in Sanford?
yeah. So that one was donated by that church.
Hmm.
Yeah. They basically sold it to that Central Carolina group. And
Interesting.
yeah, that whole, we won't go into it. I'm very familiar with that one.
Yeah.
It's a complete violation of our traditions. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Well, I
So
spoke
anyway,
there, so does that mean that I'm gonna
no, hey, you
get
know
a
what?
couple days off my sobriety or what?
No, I mean that's eventually going to come around and blow up. Even though they've been there for what, 30 or 40 years,
Yeah.
it's eventually not going to work out.
Hmm.
Yep,
Interesting. So club membership dues are not a violation, but they can be confusing.
correct.
Is that what I'm gathering?
That's right.
Okay. More will be revealed to me.
More will be revealed. Yeah,
Where are we? Okay, tradition 7,
yeah,
self-supporting, declining outside contributions.
yeah.
So this is where I brought up earlier, which I'm hoping that you have some more information on, because what I found it wasn't looking great, and I'm not entirely sure that I understood it. But are we actually self-supporting through contributions?
So Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole, the I would we're not, to answer the question specifically, we're not 100% self-supporting through contributions from groups and members at at the GSO level. The I guess another question on that would be if we just stop selling books today, could they cut enough expense to stay in business just based on group contributions? I don't know that. I could probably figure it out by looking at their financials. I can tell you this in 2022, and this is straight from the the conference report that anybody can get on AA.org. In 2022, the 23 numbers aren't out yet, so I mean they might be, but I didn't have access to them. 46% of GSO's total revenue was from group contributions. The rest of it was mostly from literature sales. So you had about $16 million in literature sales and about 11 million from group contributions. Now, when you net that out and you take out the cost of making and distributing the literature, it changes a little bit, actually a lot. 66% of the net revenue is from group contributions, and the rest was from book sales. So in that year, we ran it at a $1.8 million deficit. So we spent more money than we brought in, almost $2 million worth. And if you look at 66% of net revenue from group contributions, and then you ask the question, well, are we self-supporting? Well, we were 66% self-supporting.
Hmm.
So, right, and it's always been that way since for a long, long time. And there's always different opinions about that in AA. We just happen to kind of be involved with people that think that AA technically is not self-supporting. And I mean, the numbers would show that, unless you want to say that book sales are part of being a group contribution. The one of the challenges with saying that is that a lot of our books are sold outside organizations, which I guess is a good thing if you're needing the revenue.
Hmm.
But not all books are sold to groups and to members. A lot of them are sold to bookstores or to treatment centers, Hazelden, um, you know, other recovery related like companies and sites. So if you
Interesting.
yeah, if you're interested in that, you should go on and look at the latest conference report. It's got all the financials in there, and it's got all of the. It even has numbers on how many pamphlets they sold and which pamphlets they were, and it's interesting information.
I just grazed because I have been so entrenched in a separate financial situation within AA. That was also very similar to this, where it kind of is projected one way. We're fine, we're fine. Oh my gosh, don't worry about it. All this crap is bringing in so much revenue. And finally, you see the breakdown of it, and it's like, well, that wasn't true.
Yeah,
That just wasn't exactly true.
yeah,
And I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm not trying to sound like I'm just so hashtag blessed with where I got sober, but I really struggled financially for a long time. And um, AA members always made sure that I could pay my own way to go to the state convention and that I could serve. And like they always made sure that I was able to do that. Um, Now it may, I remember one time that all of a sudden these two old timers in my home group, their, house cleaner was out of town. And so I went and cleaned. I didn't even have a driver's license. Like one of these dudes picked me up. He's old and drives this red Tahoe that's in immaculate old condition. And he's flying down the highway driving 80 miles an hour. I'm like, any moment, we're both gone. But like they allowed me to clean their homes. They paid me way too much. I'm like, this
yeah,
is way too much. Now they made sure I did a good job. I don't clean houses for a living, by the way. This was just something that they're like, oh, hey, by the way, my house cleaner just happens to not be here. And amazing. I had just enough money to do the thing,
yeah,
you know? And I've always been taught in Alcoholics Anonymous that have a prudent reserve. Don't spend more than you make. Make sure that you pay off all your amends first. Take your coffee with you to the coffee meeting. You can't afford that. It's not your money.
yeah,
It's someone else's money. So I think sometimes it just gets like not upsetting in the sense of like, oh, well, that's not what I was told. Just upsetting in the sense of the freedom that I have, um, and how it really shaped who I am as a person. Like I am more willing to help other people. I am more willing to sacrifice a little in the moment to get something more long term. And a lot of my financial amends, prudent reserve, saving, all of that came from something that like doesn't exist as a whole in AA, I feel like. I'm just like,
yeah,
wait a minute.
yeah. I've had the same experience as far as not doing well financially in sobriety and people helping me out. It is interesting that I mean, if you read the tradition, even read some of the illustrated pamphlet and other things, it all says, and I even think in A Comes of Age, Bill Wilson wrote, we shouldn't do anything we can't afford.
Hmm.
But yet, we ran at a deficit. We got to sell books to stay in business, it looks like.
Hmm.
And I think to your point is, so what would happen if we skinnied some of that stuff down and literally tried to operate on just group contributions?
Yeah.
We probably could operate. You
Well, and
you probably could pull it off.
I think too that more groups and more individuals, would be willing to make up the difference if they saw changes
100%.
being made, because that has been my experience.
Completely agree with that. But see, that's where you got to have faith. And I think we've seen on some of the state committees that we've each been a part of, and even at the local intergroup, people get scared,
Hmm.
and you really see people's true color about kind of how they have, if they have any faith or not when it comes to issues like this, because they 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 don't practice that faith, yeah, and probably have prudent reserves, or reserves that are probably too big for what they're doing, instead of trusting the process and trusting the fellowship. So it's an interesting topic. We could talk about it for a long time. I mean, I think it's interesting that we ran into deficit, but yet we're spending, you know, I think we spent about $600,000 on the Grapevine app last year, and I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of money, so you can figure out how many days you've been sober, or um, check your spiritual maintenance and the 4 checkpoints. Um, the Grapevine ran at about a $400,000 deficit that same year, 2022, and it's got 59,000. This is in the report. They've got 59,000 subscriptions, and they claim it's the voice of AA. It's the International Journal, and we claim to have 2 million members, somewhere maybe between 2 and 3 million members now worldwide. I don't know. Um, so that's less than 3% of the population reads the Grapevine. Right. And to your point earlier before we started recording, if you think about how many people have double subscriptions, or
Hmm.
how many people like bought subscriptions for people that don't read it, or how many go into like a facility. I mean, it's that, so there's probably 40,000 people that subscribe to the Grapevine, and we continue to lose money and spend money on it. That's weird to me if you really think about it. But it's, again, it's one of those things that nobody really. I know they've discussed it, and several years ago it almost got kind of canceled, I guess would be the word. It didn't. But when you look at the amount of energy and time and the arguments we get in about it, um, I personally was glad to see them kind of get a little more up to date with technology with it, but it hadn't helped.
Hmm. Well, I think it's interesting that we continue to publish new compilation books from the grapevines. Once again, I don't have any problem with that, but why?
Yeah,
Like, read the grapevine when it comes out.
yeah. That
And we don't need special interest grapevine books. I'm
no,
sure people like those, but I would just be interested to see, which I haven't looked at the report like you have, how much money is that generating in relation to the expense?
yeah. That's
Skinny
good.
it down, baby. Just
Yeah,
have the grapevine going, man. Let's all get excited just about the grapevine.
yep, yep. That would be my vote, but I don't know. I mean, I think eventually we're going to have to look at some of that stuff. And a long time ago, an old general manager, a guy named George Dorsey, we had him come in to do a weekend workshop thing. He was the general manager of the GSO then. He made the statement, this would have been early 90s, that he thought that AA was going to have to get smaller to get better. And
Wow.
it's interesting. It was Bill kind of alluded to it on episode 3, where he was not into numbers and thinking that AA had to be the biggest.
Hmm.
I had never actually heard anybody else say that. I had
Yeah.
often thought that. But he was kind of implying that we don't need to keep doing new things to kind of grow our membership.
Yeah.
That, that maybe we should look at, getting back to being a little more specific and focused on the purpose. And I mean, I think now we do a lot of things for really small groups of people. And I know that feels good, but the first tradition says our common welfare comes first. And I think we make a lot of decisions based on what's good for one or two people. I know I'm exaggerating that a little bit versus what's best for the most.
Well, I
And
just know in my family, okay, this is a small, in my family, no one makes this big concession for me because I'm an alcoholic and I don't expect them to.
right,
So like
there you go.
it, they accept me or they don't for who I am and the fact that I don't drink and that I'm gonna, I go to meetings or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I move forward with my life. It's just not that critical for them
Yep.
to dive on in and understand alcoholism. Like it just, anyway, it's a non-issue. Tradition 8,
Yep.
forever non-professional. But our service centers may employ special workers.
Yep.
So instead of going the same direction of just like, oh, okay, intergroup manager, da 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 da, one of our guests before he got on with us, and I don't believe he brought it up, but he brought up sober coaches,
Yes.
and it was something he did not know about, and he just found it out, and his mind was freaking blown. And
I was surprised he had just found out about it, but go ahead.
yeah, so it kind of grouped in with that. I think maybe most recently, it's at least for the area where I am and people that I know, it's peer support counselors,
Specialist.
specialists.
Yeah.
Um, but we have sober
And
coaches.
and
And
harm reduction.
yep. So does that imply that people are getting paid to do 12-step work?
Well, in some cases, I think so because again, they're not. But a lot of the peer support specialists, when they get like their credentials, and a lot of them are tied in with what's called harm reduction. There's a lot of them, and sometimes they're tied to a treatment center, or they're tied to like an IOP, or they're tied to like a DWI assessment company, or um, things like that, detoxes, and they're places where we get members from, and we have a lot of AA members that like do treatment or CPI work there. And some of those folks are members of AA groups, and they have a very hard time separating the jobs, the job from their AA membership. And they actually bring some of that stuff into their AA meeting or their AA group. And so there's a lot of the membership that gets confused about it. And so
I
I think
could
it
I could
does,
see that for sure.
yes, I think it does imply that I think people look at it and they think, oh man, he's getting or she's getting paid to basically be an AA member.
Hmm.
I know they're not,
Yeah.
but the implication's there. The perception is there with a lot of the
Mhm.
newer AA members.
Well, I'll say that sometimes, like as far as the peer support specialists are concerned, it's like I didn't even know because I know these people as AA members, and maybe I'm not that close to them. And um, the home group used to be our location moved. And so not as many people would drive out there. But when I would see them, I'd be like, oh, there's that girl I haven't seen in a while. And she'd have a couple people with her. And I'm just like, oh, okay, she's bringing some new people to the meeting. But it would be weird. Like it got weird somewhere. I'm just like, oh, hey, how's it going? And it
Yep.
was weird. And I'm like, introduce me to your people. And it was weird. And, and this was not that long ago, 2, 3 years ago, other AA members from my home group had to be like, oh, well, she's like not work or she's working right now. She brought them from the recovery
Hmm.
house or whatever place here. So she's like, that's why she didn't share when she was called on and whatever. I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It was just interesting because the people I see are still like coming in the meeting, sitting down,
Hmm.
participating in some ways in the meeting.
Yep.
So I could see where that would get confusing. I'm not
Yeah.
saying I'm the smartest or the dumbest person ever. I'm just your average gal.
Yeah.
But a lot of this stuff, I'm just like, I think that I would be confused. Sometimes I have to remind myself because I work in a client-based business. I'm not a therapist, kind of. I do hair.
You
That
kind
like
of,
my
yeah.
clients that come in that are AA members that sometimes kind of like I have to, I'm like, I'm at work. I don't necessarily say that to them, but I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
this is not a fifth step.
Yeah.
Um, so like I
Yeah.
could see where if that was like your job, your title, it could get a little mucky.
It can. Yeah.
When I was in treatment, my counselor, who I did not know was an AA member, but that's a different story. I didn't know much when I got here. She would either sit in the way back and like everyone at that meeting knew that she was not participating. She didn't even introduce herself,
Hmm.
or like she didn't go in at all.
Yeah.
I had no
Yeah.
clue she was an AA member. Now, most
Yeah.
people probably knew. I didn't. I was brand new. I was just like, okay.
Yeah. I would think it'd be best to not go in at all, but
Hmm.
yeah, I guess the message for us would be we shouldn't get paid to help people
Yeah.
or to 12-step people and to help people in AA, and that when we're at a meeting or at our group, we should be there as an AA member with the sole purpose of trying to help somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you work in recovery somehow, then keep that separate from your AA membership. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone did tell me that he has a sober coach.
Yeah. So we
And I
so
found that interesting.
yeah. We maybe should look at doing a full episode
Yeah.
about sober coaches and paid sponsorship.
That'd probably be fun.
It would,
Email
would be
us.
it would be fun, and
It's something you'd be interested in.
maybe we get Earl to come on, and
Mm.
yeah, uh, that's a whole other story. I don't have time to talk about it right now with Earl and Matt. Somebody will know what I'm talking about. And the other one, oh, the interventionist.
Yep.
You know about those? Yeah, we'll talk about them later.
There was something else. What's the older term for a sober coach? What did they used to be called?
Well, there's sober liaison.
Liaison. Yeah, I like the sober
Yeah, the
liaison.
sober liaison. Yeah, there's still some of
Mhm.
those around, and some of those cats are making bank.
It's
Mm.
pretty
We're
crazy
doing
to
it for
have
free.
that.
What are we doing, Shank? I mean,
I feel like the only way I could do that is if I was a non-alcoholic, pretending like I was an alcoholic, helping you get and stay sober, telling you what to do, or like managing your calendar or something.
no, here's what I'm thinking we do. We get a private jet and we cater only to really wealthy people,
Yeah.
and we fly around
Hmm.
and do these interventions with them with their families, and we just kind of hang out with them and help them and
Sounds
just
great.
and charge big money and just fly all over the place.
Sounds great.
Yeah. All right. Let's move
It's
on.
it's really worked for all the celebrities I've heard.
Yep.
Sounds like they're all staying sober.
Very well.
All right, tradition 9. AA ought never be organized. Service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. So, I think this kind of goes back to like minority opinion, um, because I have felt at times now, what is it people say? I'm very direct. So I think it would take a lot for me to sway my opinion to just be like, okay, I'll go with the majority anyway. Um, but you know, it has just seemed like to me there have been times that I've almost been I don't want to say bullied necessarily, but like I mean when I have really been encouraged or shamed a little bit like into just going with what the majority thinks.
Yeah.
I don't have that personality. When you do that to me, I will double down, triple down, quadruple down on whatever it is that I brought up to begin with. Because I don't feel like, especially in AA, like I don't like feeling cornered.
Yeah.
Like this has always been somewhere where you can have an opinion that you can have your opinion. You have the right to be wrong. Like all these different things that I've been able to apply in my life, and AA members have allowed me to be wrong a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so do you think
Ag-
that
ag-
certainly this is not unique, but do you think that other trusted servants are kind of feeling like they're being coerced or I mean, I don't want to use really strong language. I'm not saying that they're like being held at shank point,
Well, yeah.
but like, you know.
Well, I think they are. I know that some of them have even told me, and my own experience when I was on the area committee, I was an area officer, and the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years in A, we've had I think some very interesting and controversial issues come up, and like it or not, no people don't like to say this, but some of them are social and borderline political, politically slanted. That I think A was, if you follow the traditions, we should be insulated from. But nonetheless, they come in, and when you have an alternative kind of view on it, that's just based on tradition and common sense. You 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 get, I don't know what the word is, but almost assaulted. I mean, we saw it at that meeting years. It's been several years now when they were talking about the preamble, and a guy we know and love, been sober a long time. He stated his experience on why the preamble should have stayed the way it was. That fellowship of men and women. He was very factual. He was very calm. He was very polite. He was a gentleman, and he got assassinated by people saying that he was closed-minded. He was an old, angry white man. Um, that, and then they sold it by claiming, that. So anyway, I mean, he, that didn't stop him from speaking up, but it does stop a lot of people, and they're afraid of what people are going to think about them when they kind of reveal what they really think about things. And so, yeah, and I've even talked to a few folks that are afraid to speak up publicly. Right? I've had, well, this. We've had several very respected people in AA that claim that that we're off track by saying stuff publicly that we believe. Well, I mean, why? That's what the traditions are about. I mean, we're supposed to be able to voice our thoughts and experience and even our opinions if we want to. I mean, uh,
Well, and I've never, here's what I have trouble with on that is like, I've never stated that someone else shouldn't hold the opinion that they do, but
right.
don't try to force me to have it.
That's right.
And like, what I have always loved about AA is that I get to show up here and I'm told from the beginning, it doesn't matter what any of the other outside circumstances are. I didn't have a car, I didn't have a driver's license. I went to prison, I'm a felon. Then I had a old roller skate car for a long time. I've lived in a rundown apartment for years. Like none of that mattered.
Yeah.
Like I could still show up in AA and I could still be informed and have an opinion on things. I didn't have
Hmm.
to drive a brand new fancy car to have a majority or minority opinion.
Yeah.
Like Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me all of that, that like I shouldn't be looking at all of this, all of these outside circumstances. And I shouldn't look at someone who has a lot and just think that because they have all of these outside things that I should go along with their opinion either.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it just gets like really upsetting, I think, to me when I feel like people just, it's not even a feeling. It is very obvious that people will shut you down because you don't agree with them.
Yeah.
And that's just not what I've been taught. I would never want anyone to just go along with what I say because I think it's best, or to end the conversation, or to end the business meeting, or to
Mhm.
whatever it may be,
Yep.
just because of positions I've held or not held.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I've had people tell me that they've been afraid to speak up nowadays, and
Well, people are afraid to speak about
and
anything. There's a flyer that's going around for a event. It's an AA event, and the flyer sucks. And I voiced that. And okay, people didn't like that I voiced that. That's fine. But then several people who saw it came up to me and they were like, "Hey, oh my gosh, how about that? Like, it just seems like it's in poor taste." And I said, "You should go tell those people over there." But they're like, "Oh, no, 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 I couldn't. I couldn't."
yep,
I know that that's not
we
everyone's personality. Okay, it is mine.
yeah.
I know that it's not everyone's, and I don't expect everyone to be like me. But I really wish that more people felt like they were, this is where it's important to be seen and heard at AA, and it's where people get shut down the most.
hmm
I just like can't reconcile that in my brain.
it's strange. We were supposed to be insulated from that stuff because of the traditions,
Hmm.
but it just seems like a lot of the same stuff that's going on in society is kind of filtered in, and it's kind of sad. And if you're listening, I mean, we both have been in situations where the group conscious did not go in our favor, and it was a well-informed group conscious, and we go along with it
Yeah.
because we trust that process. But I don't know that that applies all the time anymore.
Well,
And I used
and
to didn't think that.
what's difficult too is when this has happened too. If it's an informed group conscience, it doesn't go your way. That doesn't mean just bring it up at the next business meeting.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
You
You
know,
just,
give it a
and
chance. Go with it
it,
for a while. And
yep.
either people will realize, I think we had Shelly on this season, and people will realize, she was talking about like, they kind of made a vote. And sorry, Shelly, if I'm getting this wrong, but they voted and it wasn't really the group conscience. And then over time, like the group conscience did what the group
It
conscience,
that's
it
right.
worked itself out. Um, so
Hmm.
anyway, there you go. There you go.
Well, Shank, we better move along here, huh?
Tradition 10.
Yep.
No opinion on outside issues. A name ought never be drawn into public controversy. Well,
Mm.
just restart this podcast episode.
We could. Yeah. We should probably do a whole nother episode on this one.
I mean, I think we've done a good job probably up until this point of explaining that, opinions have crept up into AA. And I'm certainly guilty of that too. Like, I don't ever want to make it sound like I'm just perfect and I've never given like a bad outside opinion on something because
Hmm
I have.
hmm
Um, but people that agreed with me and disagreed with me, who care about me, who have seen me in AA this whole time, will take me to the side and be like, "Hey, that was not good. You probably want to clean that up."
So I'm curious if so. Just as an example, since A has agreed to, translate the big book into plain language, right?
Hmm.
And you read some of the background on that about how they're going to help, that we all read it. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to get my words right. That a large majority of us read at was it a third grade or a fifth grade level?
Yep, one of those.
I mean, I don't know where they got those details from. Um, I mean, and then but does that imply that they're taking an opinion on an outside issue? They changed the preamble, and they wanted it to be, their words, non-gender language. Is that taking an opinion on an outside issue? You don't need to answer it. I'm just talking out loud here. Um, I think externally, Alcoholics Anonymous has done a very good job throughout the years of not getting involved in what religious and political and alcohol reform type issues. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
never have. It's part of the reason that we're still around, probably. But internally, it seems like maybe we've picked up some of that. I love the piece that you got here. What AA does not do.
Mm-hmm.
If we would focus more on that, we might be all right. It kind of summarizes everything we've been talking about,
Yep.
right? We don't recruit members. We don't keep membership records.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how about that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, we don't follow up or try to control members. We don't provide hospitalization, drugs, medical, or psychiatric treatment or advice. We don't provide housing, food, clothing, jobs, money, or other services. This is actually in the AA group pamphlet, by the way, or what AA does, and I think some other pamphlets.
Mm-hmm.
We don't provide domestic or vocational counseling. We don't engage in or sponsor research. Whoa. You see all that research they did on the plain language? Oh, we don't affiliate with social agencies. See, there's another one, right? There's a difference between, there's a fine line between cooperation and affiliation.
Yeah.
And to your earlier question about the peer support folks and harm reduction,
Mm-hmm.
that's the other thing that does. It does kind of imply that we're affiliated with some of those organizations.
Yeah.
That's why you got to be careful with that. We don't accept money for services or contributions from non-AA sources. We know that that's being done in some areas
Yep.
or some groups, and we don't provide letters of reference to parole boards, attorneys, court officials, schools, businesses, social agencies, or any other organization or institution. Read the literature.
I'm pretty sure this list was read to me verbatim, like
Yep.
day 31 of sobriety. So when I got out of that treatment center, my sponsor laid it down like, hey, you're not looking for an attorney in this AA meeting. You hear me? Like, I know you've got some stuff going on.
Yep.
You know, you sit down and shut your mouth.
Shut up.
And then I spilled her coffee, and that was insanely embarrassing. So, all right, tradition
Uh,
11.
well, we got 11 and 12 left, huh?
Yep.
Oh, anonymity.
Yep. Traction rather than promotion.
Well, a question I would ask myself is, am I an attraction just by the way that I live,
Yeah.
right? So, um, yeah, I mean, does the way that we live and the way that we act, is that I guess a good example for the principles of the program? And I guess more specifically to tie it into the tradition, um, am I, careful to not promote myself or to give the impression that I speak for Alcoholics Anonymous? Um, I mean, I think we've had some people tell us that we're violating traditions by doing a podcast. I don't think that's accurate. There's AA members that have been on radio shows and stuff for ever since the beginning. It's funny that, I mean, this again ties into all the contradictions. Everybody was opposed to like online meet. Not everybody. A lot of people were opposed to online meetings and uh, using technology for stuff. And I've been sponsoring people. I sponsored people on Skype for long before anyone knew about video. And um, anyway, so right, so COVID hits, and now everybody's on Zoom and talking about how great it is, and
Mm-hmm.
the video and all that. And so now, like, the tradition doesn't apply anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and so it gets bent to suit somebody's need.
Yeah.
I got off track with that, but anyway, um, the tradition's clear. Personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. So that would mean no full name, no picture or face at the public level. And again, the tradition was put in place to protect Alcoholics Anonymous from people,
Hmm.
not to protect, my anonymity from people. It so they wouldn't have any, self-proclaimed messiahs or anybody using the AA name to benefit themselves. Was really the purpose of it. And I've always thought you don't hear this much in Alcoholics Anonymous, that a lot of stuff gets lumped into anonymity that's not anonymity. And I think there's a difference between anonymity and personal privacy.
Hmm. Well, there's a meeting I go to every week, and they go around and introduce, everyone goes around and introduces themselves. And this is not my home group meeting. I drive someone to this meeting, and it's a large meeting. There are probably 75 to 100 people there. And anyway, I introduce myself by my first and last name. It's a closed meeting.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
people
like
say,
me and the guy that sits next to me and like one other person. And it's interesting because I've had people come up to me after and just be like, basically, read the room. Like you and that guy and that other guy are the only ones that do it, you know? So
yep,
it's been interesting to try to have a conversation. It's like, I don't know, I just did whatever my sponsor did when I was newly sober. So if she said her last name, I did. I don't really understand, so fine, but it's just interesting to try to have a conversation with someone about anonymity. And maybe it's just the custom of that group. Like
yeah, yeah,
maybe it's for time. No one has said that to me though. They're like, no one says their last name here. Um, you can say your last initial. Like I've been told many things.
not that.
Not that.
Oh, I've been called out for it before. It's at places or asked about it. Like, why do you do that? And if you just so you'll know that it's in the pamphlet, AA group or no, understanding anonymity. It does say in there that we probably should use our full name in AA.
Hmm.
There's a great excerpt in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. I don't know exactly what page it's on, but Dr. Bob wrote that you should use your full name in the fellowship, and that for people in AA to not know who you are and what your name is, that's as much of a violation of anonymity as you going out publicly and telling everybody you're an Alcoholics Anonymous,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense. So,
Yeah.
and I just think there's a big difference between that and what I call personal privacy. I mean, if you don't want people to know your business, then don't say it in an AA meeting.
Uh-huh.
And if you say something in an AA meeting, you should know that people are going to talk about it and that people are going to, probably tell other people. That's got nothing to do with anonymity. It gets lumped into anonymity,
It
but it's not.
does.
It's not anonymity.
Hmm.
It's
Well,
just
like
not.
don't do a fifth step sharing in a
Correct.
meeting.
Yes.
I mean, I'll share things that maybe
Yeah.
some other people wouldn't share, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I'm a very,
Eh,
my personal life is very personal and private.
Yeah.
People will be like, oh my gosh, I never knew X, Y, and Z about you.
Yeah. And that's
Mhm.
fine.
There you go.
So, like tomorrow night, if we're at dinner and somebody says, "Hey, was little Jimmy at the meeting last Thursday?" and we're all members of the group, and we tell Scott that yeah, Jimmy was there, that's not an anonymity
Mm-mm.
violation. But you'll
No.
hear people say that.
Yeah.
You
Don't-
violated my anonymity.
Who
Well, no.
you see here, let us stay here.
Oh man, craziness.
Which is also why
The-
non-alcoholics should not be in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Correct. It all ties together. That's absolutely right. The other thing about this one that we mentioned it, we probably should do a whole segment on it, is just the whole issue with social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going out public on social media and telling people you're an Alcoholics Anonymous member and posting your sobriety coins and chips and toys and trinkets.
Well, here's
I
the
mean,
thing too, like from back home where I live, where I grew up in East Tennessee, I can tell people that are sober who don't post anything about it. Like
Yes.
you just know. It's a way
Yes.
of life.
Yes.
Like I know.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. People have known that about me, and I don't post anything on
That's
social media. That's probably how they know.
that's the attraction, not promotion. That's what it's talking about. We live in such a way that people know. Yeah, and they're attracted to it. I,
Yes.
yeah, I mean,
Tradition 12.
well, here we are, number 12.
Here we are. Of course, still kind of discussing anonymity.
Yeah, again, I think this is all more tied to humility and, not being a big shot, not being an AA celebrity, and being thankful for our sobriety and thankful for the new. I know sometimes when you hear us talk, it doesn't sound like we've been given a new way of life, but we have been absolutely have recovered and have been given a new way to live, and we're extremely grateful for that. And I think that number 12 is about acknowledging that and realizing that without the group and without a loving God and without the principles of the steps and traditions and even the concepts to some point, we probably wouldn't be sober. Um, yeah, and it does. I see some of the stuff here. It does tie back to concepts. I think step 12 or tradition 12 is kind of a roll up of all the other previous traditions, but some things out of the warranty 6. I love that. No penalties to be inflicted for non-conformity to A principles. If you're going to stay sober, you're probably going to conform eventually, but
Yep.
we don't put any penalties on people, and we don't put penalties on people that have differing opinions. There's no fees or dues to be levied. Voluntary contributions only. No member to be expelled from AA. I I got a call from a group in another state not long ago, and they were going to kick a guy out of the group because he didn't come to the business meetings, and they want to know my thoughts on that. Well, he's still a member there.
There you go.
If that helps you know what my answer was, it just doesn't make any sense. We don't do that. Membership is always the choice of the individual. Each AA group to conduct its internal affairs as it wishes. It being merely requested to abstain from acts that might injure AA as a whole. Now here's one, Shank. Any group of alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that as a group they have no other purpose or affiliation. So, so, so if I'm a specialized group, right? So if I'm men only, God, the idea of going to a men only group just drives me crazy. It's just, well, but if I'm in a men only group or a young people only group, uh, or there's doctor groups, there's persons of color groups now.
There's a meeting that I
Doesn't,
used to
doesn't
go
that,
to, and it's an LGBT, I don't know,
yeah,
whatever. And
love it.
it was what I really, really enjoyed is in their opening readings, they would say, like, hey, this is an AA meeting first. Now, I'm paraphrasing. This is an AA meeting first. Like, you can be here if you're an alcoholic, blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing they would say is pretty much do not even look at your cell phone at all. Like,
Nice.
It was like, put your cell phone on silent, not vibrate. If you need to look at your phone, you text on your phone, please leave the room. Do not disrupt the meeting when you get up to leave the room to use your cell phone. I mean, it wasn't that dramatic,
Yeah,
but I just remember being like, this is some pretty strong opening readings. I like that.
that's pretty
Now
strong.
it could kind of get a little diverted into some things that I don't think are appropriate for an AA meeting, but I
Yeah,
don't think it was necessarily because it was a specialized group meeting.
right.
I mean, that can happen in any meeting.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but they made sure to say that in their opening readings, and maybe a lot of groups do that. I don't know. The other meetings that are specialized groups that I have been to, attended, taken a topic to, given a talk at, it doesn't seem that way. It was more like, this is a women's meeting and we don't have coffee because we don't make coffee because we're women and already are making too many
oh
dinners.
yeah, oh
And I was
yeah.
just like, I mean, okay, hey, that's fine, but like, you could have just said we don't have coffee. Like, I was not going to ask any further questions, I promise.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I know we talk about it a lot, but it just seems a lot of the specialized groups do in fact have an other purpose or affiliation. That's just kind of it's not in the spirit of our traditions.
I just know it was really important, and it's always been important to me to know that, like, just because I did go to prison and I was sober and I've stayed sober, that doesn't mean that that's the only area where I'm useful. It also doesn't mean that I can only go to meetings with other people that have also been incarcerated. Now, do I
Right.
like going to events and like chumming it up with all my buddies and talking about count time and, everything else? Sure, it's funny. But it's not appropriate. Like a lot of that stuff is not appropriate to share in an AA meeting anyway.
Well, that's right. That's the thing that you get from a lot of those groups. Well, I'm able to share, like
Hmm.
the men's meeting. I'm able to share, at a deep level with these guys, and that's stuff I share with my sponsor or a trusted friend.
Hmm.
Not in an AA meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, we're supposed to be focused on solutions when we're talking at an AA group or at a meeting. And, if I'm talking about stuff that's just for men, I mean, that's not the purpose of why I'm there.
There you go.
No, that's why I have a sponsor and friends. Well, Shank,
Do you have a burning desire?
yeah, anybody got a burning desire out there
Hmm.
that you need to? Anybody sitting on a drink that needs to share before we get out of here? Anybody want to talk about me and my recovery? Oh my goodness. Well, I think we just covered some meeting shrapnel. So, hey, listen, if you're out there, we appreciate you listening to us, and feel free to follow us on any of the streaming platforms that you're listening to. Maybe like us, give us a comment, and we're always looking for meeting shrapnel, meeting topics.
We've had some good emails lately of people just sharing their experience with topics we've covered and discussed and kind of
Yes,
their opinion, their experience on things. And so it is genuinely a lot of fun to read those when it's something that kind of goes against maybe something that I've said or you've said. I really enjoy when
yes,
people do that. So,
yes, we appreciate that, and we encourage it. So send it on, and hey, listen next week, season 6. We got a surprise for you. In the meantime, be free.
freedom.
Thanks for listening. If you have a comment, suggestion, or just need help, you can email Shank and Wayne at freedom@alcoholicsalive.com. Remember, we're recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous, but we do not speak for Alcoholics Anonymous, nor do we get paid. Join us next week for another great episode.